I popped out over the weekend, just needed a break from everything, and took a stroll up the road to the cemetery. There's a nice cemetery, it's very peaceful in the cemetery. You can get away from everybody. Occasionally there's the odd dog walker and what have you. They've got park benches and you can sit there and just have a bit of contemplation, really, looking at the gravestones of the people who once was alive and now are deceased. And it's interesting looking at the names because some are faded and some are more prominent, and some of the gravestones have ivy all over them. I find that it's quite interesting. And I was looking at these names and I thought to myself, it's interesting, isn't it, that the names are all in capital letters. I suppose that's so it's easier for the engraver to sort of carve them out. Anyway, I needed to nip to the bank to get some cash out because I believe in using cash, particularly now at the moment. Cash is king, of course, and we do need to use more cash. So I put my card in, but as I went to do that, I misjudged it and it fell on the floor. So I picked up the card, and as I looked at the card, just to make sure it wasn't damaged, I saw that my name was also in capital letters. And I thought, that's very interesting. It's almost like a mini tombstone. Anyway, I put that in and got my cash out, but it was a bit disconcerting because I'd been sitting there looking at the graves with their names in capital letters, and it started to sort of fester in my mind a bit because I'd been sorting out some paperwork about a week or so ago, and I'd got through this court case that I'd had to go to, a parking infringement. Well, actually, I was in the right. It was them that was in the wrong. But when I got all the summonses and I've been sifting through the paperwork, again, there was my name in big, bold, capital letters. And there was loads of this. And I started to think, actually, my name is in capital letters on a lot of official documents, like my passport and my driving licence. So just as on a bit of a whimsy, I went online and I sort of was asking, why is it that our name is in capital letters when on official documents? And what came back startled me, because what it said was you were a legal person. Well, that sounded a bit odd, didn't it? A legal person, that's obviously legalese. What does that mean? Well, this is where it became a little bit more confusing, because a legal person, according to the proper definition, is a fiction, or a dead person, doesn't exist. And I thought, excuse me, I do exist, thank you very much. I'm not fictional, I'm real, I'm living, I've got flesh and blood, I'm a sentient being. So that just somewhat confused me. But it did remind me in a way of my dad, who isn't living anymore. He died fairly recently, and I became the executor of his estate, which with my sister, we were the sole beneficiaries of his estate. So as the executor, I would manage this dead person's estate. And I thought, that's very strange, isn't it? It's almost like this Richard Vobes version of me, the capitalisation on all the bits of paper that sort of administer me is like an estate in its own way, like a trust. And I'm like above that as the executor of that, which is very odd. So I was curious to find out more. And then I discovered there was this thing about the law, that there were presumptions in law. In fact, there are 12 presumptions in law. And these 12 presumptions, unless you rebut them and say it's not so, you're basically entering into a contract to say that you are this fictional person. Well, you know what a fiction is like. It's like reading a book, isn't it? You can't interact with characters in a book. So Sherlock Holmes, I can't interact with Sherlock Holmes in a book. Dr. Watson can, of course, because he's in the story, in the theatre of the book, in the fiction. They don't exist, but I'm outside of that as I read the book, which is very odd and very strange. So then I started to think, what am I? Am I a living person, or am I a fictional person? Well, I know that I'm not fictional. So when bills come in, and utility bills, for example, or if I have another parking issue and a parking ticket comes in and they're writing to this person, this legal person, in capital letters, are they actually writing to me, a living man or a sentient person, or sentient man? Because you've got to be careful with this term person, because as I say, person or legal person means a dead person, not living, not real, a fiction, theatre, made up. That's not me. So now I'm starting to think, you know, when the tax demands comes in, or when we have these 15-minute cities or these digital banks or any of this nonsense that's being foisted down upon us, they're not really talking to me anymore. They're talking to this legal person, of which I must be, by default, the executor. So here's a question for you. Are you a person, a legal person, a fiction, somebody who's dead? Or are you, in fact, living, a living man or woman?